The summer sun pours over the island of Kos, like molten gold spilling across the waves. On Marmari Beach, 27-year-old Anastasia Patricia Rubinska, golden hair, radiant smile, tilted her head slightly as a friend's phone camera caught her pose. Her pink floral dress swayed in the sea breeze, sunglasses resting neatly atop her head, eyes fixed on a future that seemed wide open, where dreams and summer days felt endless. But only a few hours later, that image became her final memory. Amid the pounding music of a lively cafe, she sent her boyfriend a short, clipped text. "I don't feel comfortable here." The words felt hurried, as if typed in the dark. Then, silence. Her next message read, "I'm fine. Now I'm on my way." Two sentences only minutes apart, yet they carved a small fracture, one that would later swallow every sense of safety. As night fell, the cobblestone streets of Kos stayed alive with tourists' footsteps. But somewhere in the shadows, away from the glow of street lamps and the hum of music, a figure on a motorbike carried Anastasia away from the light. She would never return. And in the void she left behind, a mystery began to take shape, cold, silent, and ready to lead us down a trail of fragments, each one bringing us closer to the truth of what really happened on that summer night. June 12th, 2023 began like any other summer day. On the island of Kos, golden sunlight, soft breezes, and the steady rhythm of tourists' footsteps echoing through narrow streets. Anastasia and her boyfriend, Me, had recently settled into their seasonal jobs at a 5-star hotel in the seaside town of Marmari. Today she had the day off, a rare pause in the relentless pace of peak tourist season. For weeks, the couple's life had followed a simple plan: work hard, save money, enjoy the summer. They had been together for over 10 years, bound by shared adventures and dreams that stretched far beyond the horizon. That afternoon, Anastasia decided to join a small gathering of seasonal workers, a familiar ritual on the island. It was the kind of get-together where hotel staff, bartenders, and chefs swapped stories over music and drinks, sharing both the exhaustion and exhilaration of the summer rush. She wore her pink floral dress, blue-tinted sunglasses resting on her head, and carried her silver backpack, details later confirmed by cafe's surveillance footage. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Anastasia chatted with friends, lifted her glass with a smile. But as the evening wore on, the alcohol took its toll. Around 10:30 p.m., she called Me. Her voice held both the looseness of drink and a thin layer of unease. "I've had a bit too much. Someone's giving me a ride on a motorbike to meet you." Moments later, she sent a text. "I don't feel comfortable here." Short, direct, like a knock on the door in the middle of the night. Mai replied quickly, telling her to wait. But within minutes, another message arrived saying, "I'm fine. Now I'm on my way." The contradiction between those two messages stopped him cold. He wanted to believe the second one, but years together had honed an instinct, and that instinct whispered something was wrong. He left the hotel immediately, heading for the spot she had shared via phone location. It was a quiet corner in Marmari, darker than he expected. No Anastasia, no familiar face in the night. He called her over and over, no answer. Using a location tracking app, he saw her phone had moved now, pinging from Tigaki, over 5.5 kilometers away. He rushed there. The area was still and sparsely populated, lit only by dim street lamps and the distant sound of waves. No trace of her, no voice answering when he called her name. It was close to midnight now. Mai stood alone in the street, phone in hand, trying to push away the worst-case scenarios. But his instincts, the same instincts that had carried them through a decade together, told him something was deeply, dangerously wrong. By the early hours of June 13th, he couldn't wait any longer. He went to the police, giving them every detail: the call, the texts, the motorbike ride, the changing phone location, and the sudden silence. To the officers, this wasn't the typical tourist gone missing case. Anastasia was known for her punctuality, and she had never once skipped a shift without notice. A search began immediately. Officers, volunteers, even a drone sweeping the island's terrain. But as the hours ticked by, one truth became clear. Time itself was becoming their enemy. And in those first hours when hope and danger existed side by side, the clock was already counting down. As soon as the search began, police focused on combing through security cameras in the Marmari area, the last place Anastasia was seen. Footage from a mini-market provided the first critical piece of the puzzle. On the night of June 12th, she left a cafe with an unfamiliar man walking toward a motorbike. He was identified as 32-year-old Salahuddin S., a Bangladeshi national working seasonal agricultural jobs on the island. Salahuddin lived in a small house on the outskirts of Marmari with a Pakistani roommate. Neighbors described him as quiet, but not unfriendly, someone who occasionally appeared at local cafes. No one imagined that within days, his name would be linked to one of the island's most disturbing crimes. Police brought him in for questioning. At first, he claimed they had simply talked before he saw her off. Later, his story shifted. He said she came to his home to buy hashish, stayed briefly, and left unharmed. The quick change in narrative set off alarm bells for the seasoned investigators. A search warrant was executed that same day. Inside the modest house, officers found items that should not have been there. Strands of blonde hair matching Anastasia's, a yellow sweater with suspicious stains, and a plane ticket to Italy for June 13th, just one day after she disappeared. There were also scratches on his hands and face, which he explained away as injuries from working with thorny plants on the farm. But forensic specialists noticed plant material on his clothing species that grew only in the Tagaki wetlands. His phone told an even darker story. In his browser history for the night of June 12th were chilling searches: how to confuse the police and how to remove fingerprints from a body. Those weren't the words of an innocent man. Witnesses at the party remembered seeing Anastasia talking to a man near the cafe entrance around 8:30 p.m., though they couldn't confirm it was Salahuddin. Another security camera located near his home captured Anastasia riding on the back of his motorbike, leaving at around 10:30 p.m. Disturbingly, at 1 a.m., he returned alone, went inside, then emerged carrying large trash bags before leaving again, movements that strongly suggested disposal of evidence. Piece by piece, the picture was starting to take shape. A man, a motorbike, a journey away from the bright, crowded streets into the island's shadows. But at this point, no one knew where Anastasia was, or if she was still alive. For the investigators, the clock was no longer just ticking, it was pounding. And if the theory of evidence disposal was correct, every passing hour meant vital proof could vanish forever. The Alikes wetlands in Tagaki were a world apart from Coast 6's bustling tourist beaches. It was a wild expanse where the salty tang of the sea mixed with the damp scent of reed beds towering overhead. Narrow dirt paths wound through marshy ground that stayed in shadow even under the midday sun. This was where Anastasia's phone had last pinged before it went silent for good. On June 17th, the search took a decisive turn. A volunteer discovered her phone lying abandoned on a remote dirt road near an uninhabited building. The SIM card had been removed, a classic sign of someone deliberately cutting off tracking and communication. Police and search teams shifted their full focus to the wetlands. Drones skimmed over the terrain, scanning for any sign of disturbed ground or abandoned objects. Divers worked through shallow water channels. Anastasia's family, her mother and brother Adrian, joined the effort, slogging through mud with expressions caught between desperate hope and guarded dread. On the morning of June 18th, a group of volunteers spotted something unusual beneath the low branches of a tree about 1 kilometer from Saludin's house and just 500 meters from where the phone had been found. It was a large concealed bundle covered with branches and dry leaves. As the layers of camouflage were pulled back, a plastic bag emerged wrapped in a bedsheet, and inside, Anastasia's body. The scene fell into heavy silence, broken only by the hiss of wind through the reeds. Even seasoned investigators, hardened by years of confronting violent crime, stood still for a long moment. The autopsy would confirm what they already feared. Cause of death: strangulation, the pressure applied with force, and for a sustained period. Her arms and torso bore bruises and abrasions, clear evidence she had fought back fiercely. There were also signs of sexual assault. Adrian later said quietly, "I feared this, but I still hoped I was wrong." The family's grief was no longer just about loss, but about imagining the terror and pain Anastasia had endured in her final hours. With the body recovered and the crime scene secured, the missing piece in the timeline had finally emerged. But the question of why still hung in the air unanswered. To get that answer, the police would have to return to the only person who might know the truth: Saludines. By late 2024, winter had settled over the island of Kos. But inside the courtroom, the air was thick, stretched tight, like a wire about to snap. Saludines was led in, his eyes dark, his face unreadable. Across from him, Anastasia's family sat close together, hands clenched as if holding themselves from falling apart. The prosecutor laid out the case with a methodical calm, though every detail cut through the room like a blade. They built their argument on 3 pillars: Anastasia's DNA found inside Saludin's home, a sequence of surveillance footage mapping her last movements and his post-crime behavior, removing the SIM card from her phone, purchasing a ticket to Italy, and concealing her body in a plastic bag covered with branches in the Alikes wetlands. They presented a grim timeline. On the night of June 12th, Saludin lured Anastasia with the offer of hashish. From his home, he took her to an isolated area near the wetlands, where he sexually assaulted and strangled her. Afterward, he returned home alone, collected trash bags and a bedsheet, and went back to hide the body. The defense fought back, calling the prosecution's theory a chain of weak inferences. They claimed her visit to his home was voluntary, insisted there was no direct proof he caused her death, and floated the idea of a third party being responsible after she left. They argued that DNA could be explained by brief nonviolent contact, but the evidence spoke louder than speculation. Surveillance showed Anastasia leaving with him around 10:30 p.m. and him returning alone at 1 a.m. Plant material on his clothing matched samples from the wetlands, and his own Google searches on that very night, how to confuse the police and how to remove fingerprints from a body, were damning. Throughout the trial, Saludin rarely looked toward the victim's family. When Anastasia's mother testified recounting her daughter's life and the horror of her loss, she broke down in tears. Some in the courtroom turned their faces away, unable to bear the details from the autopsy report. On December 6, 2024, the judge delivered the verdict: life imprisonment for murder, rape, and abduction. Under Greek law, he could request parole after 18 years, but given the severity of the crimes, that possibility seemed distant at best. For the family, the sentence was not an ending. Adrian told reporters, "We wanted justice, and we got it. But that doesn't bring my sister back." The court had closed the case. The grief, however, would remain open, a wound that time alone could never fully heal. The sun was setting over Marmari Beach, its last light spilling across the empty row of service chairs where Anastasia once stood, tray in hand, greeting guests with a warm smile. Now the chairs sat untouched, the bar silent, as if she had never been there at all. For her family, The life sentence was not a conclusion, but a single line in the long diary of their grief. Every day, since they have lived with the same unanswered question, what exactly happened in those final moments? And that answer, if it exists, is now buried forever with her. Her brother Adrian spoke through tears. He was sentenced. But for us, the pain will still be here every single day. We have to learn to live with that emptiness, because my sister no longer has the chance to. Anastasia's case is a reminder that light and darkness are often separated by nothing more than a wrong turn, a single bad decision, or trusting the wrong person. Safety isn't guaranteed just because you're in a crowded place. Sometimes it takes only one moment of vulnerability for the world to turn on its head. If this story has reached you, share it, so Anastasia's name is not forgotten, so that someone else's vacation, someone else's night out, will end in safety rather than silence. Because sometimes the only thing that keeps the darkness from swallowing the light is the act of telling the story and refusing to stop searching for the truth. Hello everyone. In this video, let's take a look at a horrifying story that took place in the year 2016. All right, let's begin. She was only 25 years old, smart, polite, a quiet girl with dreams bigger than most. Michelle Leng crossed oceans in search of a better future from Chengdu, China, to the sunny suburbs of Campsie, Australia. She lived with her aunt, studied hard, never caused trouble. On April 21, 2016, Michelle was seen shopping alone in central Sydney. Surveillance cameras captured nothing out of the ordinary. She looked calm, untroubled. That evening, she took the train home, sent a few messages to friends, and then, 3 days later, her body was discovered floating face down in a rock pool at Snapper Point, more than 130 kilometers from home. Naked, bound, stabbed over 30 times. The case shook Australia, because the truth didn't hide in darkness. It lived right inside the apartment, behind familiar walls, under the same roof. Her killer was family. But this isn't just a story about a girl who trusted the wrong person. It's a story about a predator who lived unnoticed among family, about a mother who never got the chance to say goodbye, and about a justice system that almost failed. This is the story of Michelle Leng. Michelle Leng was born on January 29, 1991, in Chengdu, China. She was gentle, quiet, and deeply attached to her parents. In 2008, Michelle's father died in a devastating earthquake. The loss changed her forever, but it didn't kill the dream inside her. Michelle was a bright student, always hardworking, and in 2011, her dream came true. She was accepted into the University of Technology, Sydney. With full support from her mother, Michelle left China for Australia to begin a new chapter. She moved in with her aunt in Campsie, a peaceful suburb in New South Wales. Her cousin, 2 years younger, also lived there. In 2012, Michelle's aunt married a man named Derek Barrett. He was 20 years younger than her and only 3 years older than Michelle. Unemployed, a failed IT technician. But from then on, he lived under the same roof as 3 women. Everything seemed normal. Michelle focused on school, made friends, worked part-time. No signs of trouble, at least, not on the surface. In early 2016, Michelle's aunt began traveling frequently to Wollongong for work. That meant Michelle was often home alone with her cousin and Derek. On April 21st, Michelle went shopping alone in downtown Sydney. Cameras captured her walking around Pitt Street Mall at 3 p.m. She seemed fine, smiling. At 4:30 p.m., she boarded a train back to Campsie. That was the last confirmed sighting of Michelle alive. That night, she texted a few friends, wished them good night, and then she disappeared. In the next 2 days, no one saw her. Not her cousin, not Derek. And when her aunt returned on April 24th, the first question was, "Where's Michelle?" Derek said he hadn't seen her for 2 days. Claimed he stayed up late on the computer, slept in. He said Michelle had been going out more with friends, hitting bars. It wasn't unusual for her to be gone. Maybe she just didn't want to be home. Michelle's cousin also said she hadn't seen her for a few days. Michelle sometimes stayed over at friends' houses. There was no fight, no poison, no alarm. But something felt wrong. Michelle had never gone off the radar like this. She messaged her mother daily. She was always active on Facebook. But now, complete silence. No logins, no calls. Only emptiness. Her aunt searched Michelle's room. Everything was still in place. Clothes neatly folded. No suitcase. Bed made. It didn't look like she had left. It looked like she had vanished. The next morning, Michelle's aunt and Derek went to the police, reported her missing, called the Chinese embassy. But by then, it was too late. At 10:30 a.m. that same day, multiple people reported a female body floating in a rock pool at Snapper Point, over 130 kilometers from the home. A woman face down, Asian appearance, estimated age between 20 and 35, about 1.70 meters tall. Stabbed, dumped. Police hadn't confirmed the victim's identity, but they had a name, and soon a match. Michelle Leng wasn't missing. She had been erased. On the morning of April 24, 2016, police received a call from hikers near Snapper Point, a rugged coastal area between Gosford and Newcastle in New South Wales. They had discovered the body of a woman floating in a rock pool, face down, hair loose, completely naked. The crime scene was immediately sealed off. Police determined this was no accident. It was a deliberate killing. The autopsy revealed horrifying details. Michelle had been stabbed more than 30 times. There were defensive wounds on her hands. She had fought for her life. She was bound, gagged, and assaulted before she was killed. The injuries didn't just end her life. They recorded each moment of terror, pain, and despair. What made the case especially strange was the distance. From the Campsie apartment to Snapper Point was more than 130 kilometers. Michelle didn't own a car. She had no boyfriend. No reason at all to be at such a remote, desolate location. As soon as police matched the missing persons report, they suspected the victim was Michelle Leng. Hours later, family members confirmed her identity. Michelle's aunt broke down. Her mother flew in from China, barely able to stand. "We still can't believe she's gone," her mother said in grief. "This pain never ends." The investigation immediately focused on the last person to see Michelle alive. That was Derek Barrett. Derek claimed the last time he saw Michelle was the night of April 21st. They had dinner, watched a movie. Then Michelle went to her room. The next morning, he woke up late and didn't see her. That night, she didn't return. He assumed she went out. He wasn't worried. He didn't search. Just sent a text and left it at that. Police were suspicious. The timeline didn't add up. Derek was home. Michelle was home that night. And there was no evidence she had left the apartment after 5 p.m. On April 21st, police immediately requested phone location data for Derek at the time the body was dumped. The result, his phone pinged at Snapper Point at 3 a.m. on April 24th. He claimed he had never been there. But CCTV from a gas station near Snapper Point showed Derek Barrett buying water and fuel that very night. He denied it. "That's not me." But the images were clear. The license plate matched. The jacket matched the one seen on apartment security footage. Pressed for the truth, he changed his story. I don't really remember that day. Maybe it was the meds. I have memory issues sometimes. Police didn't need his memory. They had data, and they had the truth. On April 26, Derek Barrett was arrested for the murder of Michelle Leng. She had been killed inside the very apartment she once called home. And the killer was the man she once affectionately called Uncle Derek. After his arrest, police conducted a full search of the Campsie apartment. No blood, no signs of struggle. The apartment was spotless, too spotless. And that raised red flags for investigators because everyone knows a brutal murder doesn't leave nothing behind. The truth was, the evidence had been wiped clean. The breakthrough came from Derek's phone. Police seized it and handed it over to digital forensics to recover deleted data. What they found went far beyond anything they expected. Before Michelle, Derek had already targeted someone else, his stepdaughter, Michelle's younger cousin. A 15-minute video recorded in 2014 showed the girl showering in the shared bathroom. The camera was hidden behind shampoo bottles. No one noticed. Another video, even more disturbing, captured Derek sneaking into her room at midnight. The girl was asleep. Derek stood by her bed, pleasuring himself. No words. Just a predator silently watching his prey, who had no idea she was being hunted. Experts said this wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated act repeated over time. It revealed a dangerous sexual disorder, escalating over the years. And by 2016, that obsession shifted from a child to a grown woman, from his stepdaughter to his wife's niece, Michelle Leng. On his phone, police found a 30-minute video of Michelle showering. She had no idea there was a hidden camera. No idea. She was being watched. Another clip showed Michelle sleeping. And Derek, once again, standing by her bed, repeating the same behavior. As terrifying as this all was, it still wasn't the worst part. In a recovered photo folder, there were 17 pictures of Michelle tied up naked lying on the bed, eyes filled with panic, mouth sealed with tape. Her face, trembling helpless, as if she had just woken up and realized she was being hunted. The photos were taken in the apartment, on the very bed where she used to sleep peacefully each night. The most chilling detail, all the photos were taken before Michelle died. There were no stab wounds yet. She was still alive when she was tied up, photographed, humiliated. The final photo was timestamped 8 a.m. on April 22nd. That's over 12 hours after Michelle sent her last message to friends. Later that day around 4 p.m., Michelle's cousin came home, stayed for 3 hours, heard nothing. She had no idea that just one room away, her beloved cousin was being held captive, tied up, and possibly still alive. The next day, April 23rd, Derek entered and exited the apartment 4 times carrying garbage bags. Security cameras caught everything. This wasn't house cleaning. This was evidence disposal. When his wife Michelle's aunt came home on April 24th, she noticed something. The apartment was unusually clean, but she didn't think much of it. No one did, because no one expected a killer to clean up at the very crime scene. At 3:19 a.m. that morning, Derek drove to Snapper Point. On the way, he stopped at a gas station, bought water, filled up the tank, all captured by CCTV. When he arrived, he dumped Michelle's body into the rock pool. Then, he took photos, almost as if he was proud of what he had done. He didn't just kill Michelle. He documented, staged, filmed, monitored, as if Michelle were just an object, a prize he had hunted in his own home. With undeniable evidence, Derek Barrett was charged with 27 crimes, including the murder of Michelle Leng, unlawful imprisonment, filming for sexual purposes, House of his stepdaughter, concealing a corpse, destruction of evidence. The trial began in October 2017. Derek, in a prison uniform, sat with his head down, silent, expressionless. His defense lawyer said he had a difficult childhood, bullied, withdrawn, lacked love. But the psychiatric expert made it clear Derek Barrett was fully aware of his actions. He was capable of control, but chose not to. During the trial, Derek sent a handwritten letter to his wife and to Michelle's family, filled with empty words. No words can express the pain I've caused. I wish I could turn back time. I will spend the rest of my life making amends. No one cried. No one forgave him. The final speaker in court was Michelle's mother. She stood up, her hands shaking, holding the translated version of her letter. Her voice cracked. Please sentence this vicious rapist, this inhumane torturer, this cold-blooded killer. He didn't just murder my daughter. He destroyed my entire family. After Michelle's death, her mother fell into severe depression. And Michelle's grandmother, once healthy, passed away, not long after, from overwhelming grief. One family, 3 generations, collapsed within months. In December 2017, the court announced the sentence, 46 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 34 years and 6 months. That means Derek may walk free in the year 2052. Outside the courtroom, Detective Gary Jubilant, the lead investigator, spoke to the media. We did everything we could. Justice has been served. But this is no victory. This is a tragedy. A pain that cannot be undone. It seemed like the story had ended, but it hadn't. 4 years later, a middle-aged woman discovered an old USB flash drive in her mother's belongings. An elderly woman, suffering from dementia, living just 10 kilometers from Derek's old home. No one knew where the USB came from. No one remembered why it was there. The woman plugged it into a computer and immediately called the police. On that USB was a folder containing 9 video clips, totaling nearly 60 minutes, all recorded on April 22nd and 23rd, 2016. Police reviewed the footage. Derek entered Michelle's room. She was terrified. She resisted but was restrained. He set up 2 cameras at different angles, from beginning to end. He recorded every act of assault, torture, and humiliation. She was no longer a person through his lens, sighed one officer. To him, she was a toy, a sick pleasure fully planned. Judge Helen Wilson, who had previously sentenced Derek to 46 years, declared, "If I had seen these videos in 2017, I would have given a life sentence, without parole." Derek was handed an additional 20 years for the sexual abuse and filming of Michelle. But tragically, the new sentence ran concurrently with the old one, which means he could still be released in the year 2052. Michelle didn't get a second chance, but her killer did. Michelle Leng didn't die because she trusted a stranger. She died because she lived too close to a monster in disguise. Her killer didn't lurk in the streets. He lived inside her house, ate at the same table, slept just 1 wall away. And she called him Uncle Derek. But the most painful part wasn't her death. It was what happened before she died. The physical torment, the terror, the pleading eyes that no one saw, and the absolute silence that continues to this day. Justice came. But is there any justice that can ever be enough for 60 minutes of horror stored on a USB drive? The investigation is over. The court has ruled. The case is closed. But for Michelle's mother, the gates of hell are still open. The day she died, half of me died with her. And when I saw what he did, I knew the rest of me wasn't alive anymore either. Tom May Jung, Michelle's mother. The case of Michelle Leng is a brutal reminder Killers don't always wear scary faces. Sometimes they wear the most familiar ones, the quietest ones, the ones that know how to wait. If you ever believed stories like this only happen in movies, remember Michelle. Remember the pain of her mother. And remember, the truth is always more cruel than any script. If you want to keep following the journey into the darkest guys, the people who fought or fell in the shadows, subscribe to the channel. I'll be back with the truth and the questions no one wants to answer. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Whodunit, the channel where we dive deep into the most chilling true crime cases. Today, let's begin uncovering the heartbreaking and mysterious events surrounding a beautiful young woman from Arizona. Mercedes Vega, 22 years old, a young woman full of life in Tempe, Arizona. She carried big dreams to open her own gym, to live a life as free as the waves of Hawaii she always longed for. On that evening, April 16th, 2023, Mercedes left her apartment at the Aubrey complex. Surveillance cameras captured her final moments, walking with quiet confidence toward her car, her posture calm and ordinary. No one could have imagined it would be the last time she was seen alive. Just hours later, her car was found abandoned near a trendy spot called Culinary Dropout in Tempe. Inside, there were traces of blood, the keys still left in the ignition, as if everything had been interrupted in a moment of panic. Around the same time, along Interstate 10, more than 60 miles away, a passerby called 911 to report a burning Chevrolet Malibu in the desert. When the flames were finally put out, the charred body of a young woman was discovered in the back seat. That young woman was Mercedes. From a normal evening in the safety of her apartment building to a horrific death in the barren desert, just a few hours apart. The chilling question echoes, who brought her there? Why would a 22-year-old woman with so much life and so many dreams become the target of such ruthless violence? This story is not just about a murder. It is about betrayal, about justice under siege, and about the darkness humans will unleash when they want to silence a witness forever. Mercedes Vega was born on March 10, 2001, in Anchorage, Alaska. From a young age, she carried a natural spark, bright eyes, an easy smile, and a heart that radiated kindness. She loved horses, adored children, and found joy in the simplest of things. When her mother Erica began a relationship with Tom Pillsbury in 2007, Mercedes was only 6 years old. Yet she quickly grew close to him, embracing Tom as a true father figure. In 2010, just before Erica and Tom's wedding, Mercedes gave him a Father's Day card. In it she wrote, "I love that you're marrying my mom." Tom kept it ever since, a reminder of how love had shaped their family beyond blood. Encouraged in every way, Mercedes flourished. She learned to play the violin, and her singing voice was so beautiful that she was invited to perform the national anthem at sports games and public events. In the water, she was a gifted swimmer. She once told her family, "My soul belongs in Hawaii." The ocean became her symbol of freedom, of living untethered to fear. At school, she excelled effortlessly, earning straight A's. Friends remembered her as both intelligent and playful, a prankster with a laugh that lit up every room. When the family later moved to Arizona, settling in Santan Valley, Erica often described her daughter as articulate, funny, and capable of lifting the weight off anyone's shoulders just by being herself. By her early 20s, Mercedes was ready to live independently. She moved into the Aubrey apartments in Tempe. To pay her bills and save toward her future, she worked a few nights a week as an exotic dancer at a Phoenix club. To her, it was never the end goal, but a means to build her dream one day, opening her own gym and becoming a personal trainer, helping others grow stronger, not only in body, but in spirit. But her life was not untouched by darkness. In October 2020, Mercedes was ambushed outside her Phoenix apartment at gunpoint. The robber, later identified as Kajo Young, stole cash and valuables, leaving her traumatized. The incident shook her so deeply that she left Phoenix for Tempe to start fresh. Yet instead of allowing fear to consume her, Mercedes chose resilience. She cooperated with police, picked Young out of a lineup, and even submitted a victim's impact statement describing the emotional toll. It was a defining moment. Mercedes refused to be just another silent victim. She was determined to seek justice, to hold the man who hurt her accountable. But courage has its cost. As the robbery case dragged on with 18 delays, often due to attorney changes, her name remained tied to Young. And by April 2023, Mercedes was set to testify against him in court. The date of her appearance, April 17th, just one day after her disappearance. Looking back, her story is filled with a cruel paradox. Mercedes wanted nothing more than to build a life of freedom, of laughter, of purpose. She did not let past trauma define her. She rose above it. But the very bravery that gave her strength also painted a target on her back. By daring to stand up against crime, she unknowingly stepped into a shadow that had been waiting for years to consume her. On the afternoon of April 16th, 2023, Mercedes Vega had simple plans. She was supposed to meet friends for dinner. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. But at the last minute, she changed her mind. Instead of heading to dinner, she sent a quick update. She would go to work at the club in Phoenix. That message, ordinary as it seemed, would later stand as the final sign of her life as it was. At the Aubrey Apartments parking garage, surveillance cameras caught details that would become chilling in hindsight. At about 8:45 p.m., a white 2018 Chevrolet Malibu, a car not registered to any resident, rolled quietly into the garage. It lingered there, waiting like a predator, lying in the dark. At about 9:15 p.m., Mercedes entered the frame. She walked with purpose, her steps confident, unaware of the danger coiled in the shadows. For her, it was just another night, walking to her car. For the people watching the footage later, it was the last glimpse of her alive. When investigators searched later, they found bloodstains in her assigned parking space, along with smears inside the front passenger seat of her car. Something violent had happened, sudden and terrifying. By 9:25 p.m., another camera recorded Mercedes's car pulling into a nearby lot by Culinary Dropout, a popular restaurant. The car was parked awkwardly in violation of local rules, the keys still in the ignition. The detail screamed haste, abandonment. And just as her car was left behind, the Malibu pulled away into the night. In the early hours of April 17th, nearly 60 miles west of Tempe, a driver on Interstate 10 noticed an orange glow against the desert horizon. A car was on fire near mile marker 85, veered into a ditch. The driver called 911. His voice hurried. "There's a car on fire. I think I saw someone outside of it." That detail would haunt investigators. Someone was still at the scene, and as the flames consumed the vehicle, fire crews arrived and fought the blaze. When the flames subsided, what they discovered left no doubt. In the back seat lay the charred body of a young woman. Around her, investigators documented items that pointed to design, not accident. 2 bottles of bleach, one partially used, a container of lighter fluid, latex gloves. These were not signs of a crash. They were signs of intention. The vehicle itself was identified as the same Malibu that had been lurking in Mercedes's garage only hours before. And the victim, through fingerprints, they confirmed it was. Mercedes Vega. The question grew heavier. What happened in those missing hours between the moment Mercedes walked toward her car at 9:15 and the moment flames lit up the desert around midnight? The evidence told a story of control of force of a plan, executed with cruel precision. The blood in the garage, the abandoned car with keys left behind, the witness who saw someone by the burning Malibu, all fragments of a puzzle with only one conclusion: Mercedes's death was not random. She had been chosen, targeted, and the plan had been set in motion long before the Malibu ever pulled into that garage. On April 17th, 2023, after the burned Chevrolet Malibu was examined, the victim's identity was confirmed. It was Mercedes Vega, a 22-year-old woman, once full of dreams, now reduced to a case number on a coroner's report. But inside that report lay tales so brutal they shook even seasoned investigators. It wasn't until October of 2023 that the Maricopa County Medical Examiner released the official autopsy. The report revealed layers of violence. Mercedes had been shot once in the arm, evidence that she may have tried to shield herself or fight back. Her head carried multiple wounds from blunt force trauma, inflicted with calculated rage and precision. Her body bore chemical burns. Bleach had been poured directly onto her face, into her mouth, and down her throat, an attempt to harass, to mutilate, and to silence. And the most horrifying discovery: she was still alive when the fire began. The cause of death was listed as smoke inhalation and thermal injuries. It was not just murder. It was torture, step by step. Inside the Malibu, investigators documented 2 bottles of bleach, one already used. A container of lighter fluid sat nearby. Latex gloves were left behind. These items painted a portrait of inmate. This was not a frantic act of passion. It was a deliberate execution, premeditated and systematic. That evening, back in Suntan Valley, Erica and Tom Pillsbury had just returned from a Caribbean vacation. When officers came to their door, Erica kept asking the same desperate question: "Is my daughter okay?" The silence before the truth felt like an eternity. Then came the words that tore through her soul: "Mercedes is dead." Erica later described it as if her very spirit had been ripped out of her body. Tom stood silent, unable to process the magnitude of the loss. From the forensic record, a chilling psychological profile emerged. The killer did not simply want Mercedes dead. They wanted her silenced, erased, destroyed. Each act: the bullet, the beating, the bleach, and finally the fire, was a layer of cruelty, a ritual of obliteration. It was more than killing. It was an attempt to erase her not only from life, but from evidence, from memory, from justice itself. And yet, despite the mountain of evidence, the investigation dragged. Erica and Tom grew frustrated. To them, the system seemed sluggish, even dismissive. Tom later voiced what many suspected: because Mercedes worked as a dancer at a Phoenix club, authorities did not treat her case with urgency. "It's like my daughter doesn't matter to them," he said. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office denied this, insisting all victims were treated equally. But months of silence weighed heavily, making grief even sharper. The forensic discoveries did more than reveal cruelty. They became a grim reminder of systemic failure. Justice delayed is justice denied. Mercedes was not only the victim of violent men, she was also a victim of the indifference of a justice system too slow to shield her when she needed it most. Her body told the truth her killers wanted erased. And while fire consumed her final moments, the evidence survived, leaving behind a trail that pointed clearly: this was not random. It was calculated, and the shadow behind it was not finished yet. The brutality of Mercedes's murder made one thing clear: this was not random. It was not impulsive. Someone had wanted her gone, silenced forever. And as investigators dug deeper, the answer began to emerge from her past. Back in October of 2020, Mercedes had been robbed at gunpoint outside her Phoenix apartment. The man who pointed a weapon at her and took her belongings was Young. She had bravely identified him in a lineup and given a victim impact statement. The robbery case dragged on through 18 delays, often due to his constant attorney changes. And fate twisted cruelly. The trial, where Mercedes was scheduled to testify, was set for April 17, 2023, the very day after she disappeared. The motive became glaring silence, the witness. But Young had not acted alone. Records showed he used his credit card to purchase airline tickets for two men traveling from Tennessee to Arizona. They arrived on March 3, 2023, and left on April 18, one day after Mercedes's body was found. Sincere Patrick Hayes, 22 years old, from Chattanooga, Tennessee, was the first to fall. In November 2024, while already in custody on unrelated charges in Hamilton County, his fingerprint was matched to a bloody plastic grocery bag recovered from Mercedes's abandoned car. In court, he admitted being in Arizona but claimed it was for business. His connection to Young, however, became undeniable. Jared DeMarcus Gray, 25 years old, was arrested in June 2025 in Catoosa County, Georgia. His fingerprint was lifted from a plastic cup found inside of the burned Malibu. Initially, Gray denied even knowing Hayes or Young, but travel records revealed the truth. Gray and Hayes had flown together to Phoenix in March, then returned by Greyhound bus. On April 18th, the day after the fire, Young, 29 years old, the very man Mercedes had identified in 2020, was indicted in July 2025. Prosecutors argued that he orchestrated everything, paying for Hayes and Gray's flights, arranging for the Malibu under a false name, and even calling an associate to retrieve a package near the burn site. It was not only revenge, it was witness elimination calculated step by step. Each man pled not guilty, but the evidence told a darker story. Hayes faced charges of first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, theft of transportation, arson of an occupied structure, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and hindering prosecution. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty, citing the cruelty of the crime and the intent to obstruct justice. Gray's defense tried to argue that the forensic evidence could have been contaminated, emphasizing his lack of prior serious convictions. His lawyers painted him as someone who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Young stunned the courtroom by announcing he would represent himself. When warned by the judge that he would be held to the same standards as an attorney, he calmly replied, "Yes, sir." It was the move of a man who believed he could outmaneuver the system. Throughout it all, Erica and Tom Pillsbury sat in the court phase, worn with grief, yet unshaken in presence. For them, every hearing was both torture and duty. Tom once admitted, "The death penalty brings some relief. It feels like we are not fighting alone." Still, nothing could fill the empty space Mercedes left behind. The evidence, the timeline, the arrests, all of it revealed a truth more chilling than a single act of violence. This was a criminal conspiracy orchestrated across states, funded and planned with cold precision. It was not only about killing a young woman. It was about silencing a witness, erasing a voice, and declaring war on justice itself. Mercedes was not in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was targeted. And the plan to kill her had been written years earlier, waiting only for the night it would be carried out. Mercedes Vega was murdered in a way that stripped her not only of life, but of dignity. Yet the tragedy did not end in the desert flames. It continued to haunt those left behind, her parents, her loved ones, and even strangers who came to know her story. Her parents, Erica and Tom Pillsbury, chose to honor her spirit in the places that defined her. They scattered her ashes in Alaska, where she was born, and in Hawaii, the place she once said her soul belonged, to the ocean. Two landscapes, one marking her beginning, the other symbolizing her dream left unfinished. As the courts called the names Hayes, Gray, and Young, the Pillsbury family was always present. They sat through hearings carrying their grief like armor. But no sentence, no verdict could ever restore what was taken. Erica once confessed justice may come, but the pain will never go away. Her words carried a weight heavier than any gavel, the reminder that a system too slow, too indifferent, had failed to protect her daughter. The case of Mercedes Vega is not just a murder. It is a mirror reflecting how fragile justice can be. When justice is delayed, crime finds the gap. When a witness dares to speak out, but is left unprotected, she becomes prey. Now one question lingers, haunting everyone who hears her story. Will the verdicts ahead truly deliver justice, or will they only attempt to patch a wound carved too deep? Mercedes once dreamed of building a gym, of helping others grow stronger. She once laughed freely, loved deeply, and believed in the future year. Her story proves that darkness can devour even the brightest souls. And yet, by telling her story, we keep her light alive. If you wish to stand with the Pillsbury family and ensure that Mercedes is never forgotten, share her story. Because only when memory endures can justice truly survive. Hello everyone, welcome back to Whodunit, where we always bring you the most chilling true crime cases. Today we'll once again dive into the heartbreaking and mysterious story of a beautiful young woman from Reno, Nevada. So let's uncover this story together. Briana Dennison, 19 years old, grew up in Reno, Nevada. She returned home for winter break with a simple but radiant plan: skiing during the day, concerts at night, and the bright hope of becoming a child psychologist, shining like streetlights after dusk. Her future looked neatly arranged, as if all it needed was the right key to open. On the night that turned into the early morning of January 18th to 19th, 2008, she left a concert early because of a cold, caught a ride back to her best friend's house, texted her boyfriend at about 4:30 a.m., then fell asleep on the couch in the kitchen, only a few steps away from the front door that was not locked. The house sank into silence, as if someone had pressed mute. By morning, her friends got up to make breakfast and assumed she had moved into the bedroom. But when the door opened, there was only emptiness. Her phone, her purse, her clothes, even her shoes were still there. Outside, it was below 0 degrees Celsius. On the pillow were a few tiny red flecks. The blanket had been dragged off the couch. The teddy bear she used as a pillow had vanished. Everyday life had shifted by only inches, yet the air froze into glass. Someone had walked straight in, left behind unknown DNA on the doorknob, and likely pressed her face into the pillow until every sound was swallowed. No scream, no struggle, just silence stretching between the kitchen and the living room. And a cold, flat question: how does someone disappear from a house full of sleeping people without waking a soul? Winter in Reno is deceptive. The bitter cold outside, the warmth of a home inside, and the easy belief that danger waits politely at the doorstep. Briana had returned from Santa Barbara, her weekend mapped out: skiing by day, concerts by night, sleeping over at her best friend's house. Those small, ordinary pieces of life looked so sturdy. On Friday, January 18th, 2008, she arrived at her friend's house to spend the weekend with two other girls. Peace began as it often does, because no one thought to lock the door. By Saturday night, January 19th, she was fighting off a small cold. Her mother encouraged her, "Go anyway, youth needs rhythm." She went to the concert, then left early, afraid the cold would get worse. In the parking lot, she asked for a ride and came back through the cutting winter air. Her friends were still out. She waited, texted her boyfriend around 4:30 a.m., and then lay down on the kitchen couch, right by the unlocked front door, just a few steps away. Around 3:30 a.m., the other girls returned, whispered a few words, then went to bed. The silence sealed itself over the house. Around 9 a.m., the smell of breakfast spread. The girls thought Briana had moved to the bedroom. The closed door seemed to confirm it. 40 minutes later, they knocked. No answer. They opened it, only emptiness. Her phone was there. Her purse, her clothes, even her shoes still in place. With the temperature outside below 0 degrees Celsius, there was no believable scenario in which a 19-year-old girl walked out in only a t-shirt. Her disappearance had made no sound. It had taken her and left everything else. They called Briana's mother. She rushed over, carrying the primal fear known to anyone who has lost a loved one. Silence can be a bad omen. While searching, the girls noticed a few red stains on the pillow Briana had used, small but heavy enough to collapse the air in the room. Police arrived quickly. There were no signs of forced entry. The blanket lay several feet from the couch. The teddy bear Briana had used as an extra pillow was missing. These details, scattered and minor on their own, joined into a single shape another person had moved through the night. In the first hours, investigators feared the simplest explanation. An intruder walked through an unlocked door, went directly to a sleeping girl, and left by the same way. Forensic analysis of the pillow confirmed the blood was Briana's. The grim reconstruction emerged, her face pressed into the pillow, suffocated into silence. On the front doorknob, police collected male DNA not found in any database. Invisible footsteps had passed through, leaving behind the one thing he could not control: biological evidence. Psychology ran in two directions. For Briana, the fatigue of a cold had nudged her to choose the couch in the kitchen, a temporary choice anyone might make, which is exactly why it feels so tragic. For the offender, silence was ritual to subdue, without noise, to withdraw, without disturbance, to leave a scene so tidy it became terrifying. Such an offender lived for twin obsessions: absolute control and the erasure of sound. Police moved outward in circles. Briana's phone showed a series of insulting messages from her boyfriend that night. Their relationship was falling apart. It was the kind of lead that feels obvious. But evidence carried more weight than suspicion. He was in another state that night. That path closed quickly, leaving behind the uncomfortable truth: sometimes the killer is not in the familiar circle. When facts thin out, science steps in. DNA on the doorknob, blood on the pillow, the modeled path through a small home, all combined into a quiet script. The intruder took advantage of the unlocked door, approached the sleeping girl, silenced her into stillness, and left. No loud struggle, only calculated violence. And from that moment, Reno began to realize they were facing not just someone strong, but someone patient, someone who worshipped order. News of Briana's disappearance spread like wildfire. Within hours, the quiet Reno neighborhood was surrounded by patrol cars, yellow tape, and questions without answers. A man living across the street told detectives that around 5 a.m., he had seen a shadow pass his window and heard someone trying to open his front door before giving up. At first it seemed trivial, but when placed beside the bloody pillow and the unlocked door where Briana slept, it became a chilling puzzle piece. A predator was testing doors in the dark. Investigators eliminated the obvious suspects. The driver who had given Briana a ride after the concert came forward after seeing the news reports. He willingly gave a DNA sample, showed proof of his alibi, and was cleared. That pushed the search outward to the unknown hands that moved quietly through the university neighborhood, men who knew the streets, the parking rhythms, the vulnerable pauses between nightlife and dawn. Forensic scientists clung to the one trace the offender could not erase: biology. From the doorknob, the lab pulled a male DNA profile not in any database. With the evidence going cold, Reno police launched an extraordinary effort: door-to-door requests for voluntary samples. About 3,000 DNA swabs were collected. The local lab quickly became overwhelmed. To speed things up, the city asked the public for help and raised $150,000 for additional testing. It was a community spending money and a hope against a void. The results no match. The FBI stepped in. Agents reviewed unsolved cases from the months leading up to Briana's disappearance. 2 reports stood out, like cuts from the same blade. In November 2007, a 21-year-old student was attacked in a parking lot. He overpowered her, showed a gun, but bolted when she screamed at the top of her lungs. In his rush, he dropped a pack of condoms. Then, in December 2007, another student, 22 years old, was ambushed outside her home. He covered her mouth and nose until she lost consciousness. She awoke in the cab of a pickup truck. The attacker forbade her from looking at him, assaulted her, then drove her back to her house and ordered her to walk straight inside without turning around. One detail chilled her memory in the cab. She had noticed a child's shoe. The lab compared the DNA from both attacks. They matched. And when compared with the profile taken from the friend's doorknob in Briana's case, the conclusion was undeniable. It was the same man. There was another disturbing connection. Both earlier victims said the attacker had taken their underwear with him. These trophies were not random. They revealed a compulsive psychology. He wanted to own a piece of his victims. He wanted sans control and a symbol to keep afterward. Police released a composite sketch based on the descriptions: a white male, average height, strong build, tanned arms, estimated between 28 and 40 years old. The sketch ran in newspapers and on television with a plea for help. Another young woman saw the coverage and reported that someone had once tried her door so violently that it bent the metal, but whoever it was did not manage to get in. That detail matched the predator's signature: testing doors at night until one opened. Panic swept through Reno. Handgun and pepper spray sales skyrocketed. Women no longer felt safe staying home alone. Volunteers combed through forests, drainage ditches, and empty lots with search dogs, while helicopters scanned from above. More than 5,000 tips came in, and still not one pointed to the man they were looking for. The city leaned forward, straining to hear the faintest sound, while the predator thrived in silence. Detectives circled back to the familiar Briana's boyfriend, who had sent angry texts that night. But phone records showed he had been in another state. He could not be the attacker. That left investigators with the darker truth: this was not a crime of passion or jealousy. It was a pattern of cycle. The offender chose transitional spaces: parking lots, porches, front doors, those brief moments when a person believes safety is just seconds away. That was where he struck, and that was how he won. Winter in Reno seemed to know how to guard a secret until the final moment. After nearly 1 month missing, Briana's name was whispered in kitchens, printed on billboards, and woven into the uneasy dreams of the city. Then on February 15, 2008, around noon, a worker cut across a vacant lot to save time on his lunch break. Behind a discarded Christmas tree, he saw a pair of socks. At first he thought it was a mannequin. A few heartbeats later, he realized it was a body and called the police with a voice barely steady. The body was naked except for socks. Next to it lay 2 pairs of women's underwear, one belonging to Briana's friend, who had not even realized it was missing, and one that belonged to no one in that house. The medical examiner confirmed it was Briana. She had been strangled. The marks on her neck showed that underwear had been used as the weapon. The grim verdict: she had been killed inside the friend's home and moved afterward. The night she disappeared was the night her life ended. The scene was more than disposal. It was theater. The underwear placed beside her body was a twisted message, an exhibition of control. It said, "I decide what to take. I decide where to leave her. I decide how silence will spread." Forensic testing of DNA recovered from Briana's body confirmed the truth investigators had feared. It matched the profile from the doorknob and the two assaults from November and December of 2007. They were facing the same predator, now escalated to murder. In many investigations, finding the body is the beginning of clarity. Here it was the beginning of a deeper silence. Every lead, more than 5,000 tips, the neighbor's glimpse of a shadow, the reports of door handles rattled, led into fog. Police revealed to the public that the offender seemed to collect women's underwear, hoping that a family member, friend, or acquaintance might recall a suspicious drawer or hidden stash. Nothing surfaced. Dozens of detectives pressed forward, but the case froze in place. And then nearly 1 year later, on November 1st, a call came in, anonymously. A woman reported that her friend had once discovered women's underwear inside her boyfriend's pickup truck. His excuse for it was feeble. Even more damning, shortly after Briana's body was found, the man had sold his truck and left town. His name, James Biela, 27 years old. The lines of an unsolved year suddenly converged on one point. The portrait thickened quickly. James was a former Marine trained in martial arts, working construction jobs near the university, the very area where Briana's friend lived. His past was a trail of violence. An ex-girlfriend said he had struck her multiple times. Once he nearly killed a man with a knife. In another instance, he broke a dog's leg without reason. Yet despite this cruelty, James had never been convicted. His DNA was never in the system. The void in the database now had a human face. Detectives placed him under surveillance and called him in. James agreed to meet without even asking what it was, about a sign of the arrogance of someone who believes himself invisible. He claimed he had been with his girlfriend the night Briana disappeared. When asked for a DNA sample, he refused. Investigators turned to his ex-girlfriend. She revealed his alibi was a lie. She also shared that they had a 4-year-old son together. With her permission, police collected a DNA sample from the boy. The result came back as near perfect. The killer's DNA matched that of a close relative of the child. Within that narrow circle, the only possible match was James. Detectives returned not with a polite invitation, but with handcuffs. The silence that had cloaked him for a year was broken by the sharp click of metal. From that moment, the anonymous DNA profile on the doorknob had an owner. After the biological lock from the 4-year-old child's DNA, the case closed in around its suspect. James Biela was arrested. While he kept silent, the file spoke for him, a former Marine trained in martial arts who had worked construction sites near the university, familiar with the very neighborhood where Briana's friend lived. His history of violence, once scattered, now looked like a continuous chain, striking his girlfriend, nearly stabbing a mice to death, breaking a dog's leg for no reason. Yet without convictions, his DNA had never entered the system. The gap that had once stalled investigators now bore his name. James agreed to meet with detectives, calm, as if he had nothing to fear. He claimed he had been at his girlfriend's house the night Briana was killed, an alibi that leaned on intimacy. When asked for a DNA sample, he refused. Detectives then spoke with his ex, who revealed the truth: he had not been with her that night. The path back into forensics opened through their 4-year-old son. The DNA test showed a near-perfect match, proving that the offender was a close relative of the child. Within that circle, the only person who fit was James. He was cuffed the metallic snap, breaking a year of silence. From there, the evidence tightened. His father told detectives about James's long history of drug abuse, the same reason he had been discharged from the Marines. His former employer confirmed that James quit his job the very day Briana's body was discovered and left the state in action that traced perfectly onto the investigation's timeline. Investigators found his old van. Fibers from the seat covers matched fibers previously found on the clothing of another student who had been abducted and later released. Still, James denied everything. In court, his defense team tried to separate the cases, arguing that the signatures were too different to belong to one man. But the DNA chain held them together, the same genetic profile from the doorknob from Briana's body and from the assaults in November and December of 2007. The behavioral pattern was consistent, silencing his victims, taking underwear as trophies, striking in transitional spaces like parking lots and front doors. Piece by piece, the portrait became whole. The trial opened as a theater of contradiction. The prosecution laid out the evidence chronologically, from the testimony of survivors to genetic matches to microscopic fibers, constructing a map of behavior: surveillance, approach, control, deprivation, and silent retreat. The defense leaned on his childhood of obesity, his alcoholic father's beatings, and his supposed good behavior in jail, trying to humanize a figure hardening into monstrosity. But on the stand, James smiled, even smirked. Those tiny wordless gestures shifted the jury's view from simple accusation to arrogance. In late May of 2010, the verdict fell like a heavy door, guilty on all counts. The death penalty was on the table. His lawyers begged for mercy, arguing his past, his upbringing, his compliance in custody, but the scales did not move. The judge sentenced him to death. Months later, 4 additional life sentences were added for other charges, a double lock. Even if the execution never happens, freedom is gone forever. In the years that followed, his attorneys filed appeals to the Nevada Supreme Court. Each time the court upheld the death penalty. James remains behind bars, with no execution date scheduled. For the justice system, the case is closed. For the city, a collective of exhale. But for Briana's family, the verdict only pulled the predator out of the night. It did not bring daylight to the darkness he left behind. The judgment closed with 2 Locke's death for Briana's murder and 4 life sentences for the other crimes. In the years that followed, James's attorneys filed appeal after appeal, but the Nevada Supreme Court upheld the sentence each time. No execution date has been scheduled. Legally, the door is shut. Humanly, it remains slightly open, because the pain of the living has no calendar. James stays behind bars, and silence, the weapon he once loved, has become his prison. Briana's family refused to stop at grief. They pushed for change, campaigning for Nevada to require DNA collection from anyone arrested for a violent offense. They believed if such a law had been in place earlier, the predator would have been identified after his first attack in November of 2007. Briana might have lived, continuing toward her dream of helping children. Law born from wounds often becomes the only way to turn loss into protection for those who come after. But life rarely ties itself off neatly. Exactly 10 years after Briana's murder, her 19-year-old cousin disappeared. After telling her parents she was going to another state with a man she had just met. She never answered her phone again. The family waited and hoped, carrying the warm ache of their first loss, as they feared a second one was unfolding. The question of why no longer belonged solely to the justice system. It became a shadow at every meal, echoing with every ring of the doorbell. From start to finish, this case leaves behind hard symbols, an unlocked door, a pillow with tiny red stains, underwear taken as trophies, and the suffocating quiet of a city asleep. Evil is not only the hand that strangles, it is also the trust we place in thresholds. Justice came, but was it enough if it only caged the offender without untangling the knots in those left behind? If you have ever lost someone, you know that a verdict is only a thin slice of the truth. Share your thoughts about justice, about the responsibility of communities, about the doors we still leave open without noticing. And if you want to keep walking with me through cases where psychology and forensics meet, where answers are never simple, stay with me for the next story. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Whodunit, where we always bring you the most chilling true crime mysteries. Today we're once again diving into the heartbreaking story of a beautiful young girl from West Ohio. So let's uncover this story together. Katelyn Markham was 23, carrying within her an entire sky of colors. This young woman from West Ohio lived for music painting and the simple joy of planting flowers outside her home. Her future was just beginning to unfold. She had recently earned her hairdressing license, and to her family and friends, Katelyn seemed destined for a life filled with light. But then the shadows crept in. Strange anonymous messages began to appear, tied to fake accounts scattered across Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. The words were familiar, almost intimate, yet faceless. Over time they grew relentless, an invasion that turned her safe world into a fragile cage. One night, a video surfaced. It had been filmed right outside her living room window. Soon after, another clip showed something far worse, a figure sitting at her very own kitchen table. This was no longer just harassment. Someone had crossed the threshold, turning her home into a place of fear. From a world painted with vibrant colors, Katelyn's life shifted into a chilling shade of gray. Who could be cruel enough to twist love into obsession? Who knew every corner of her world, every heartbeat of her life? That question hung in the air unanswered. And from that moment on, Katelyn's path veered onto a road she would never return from. At first, Katelyn's life seemed unmatched, painted with ordinary joys. She was the kind of young woman friends described as radiant, an artist who loved nature, who found meaning in crafting scrapbooks, painting with vibrant colors, and laughing with those close to her. She had just stepped into adulthood, with her hairdressing license in hand, ready for opportunities that sparkled on the horizon. But small cracks began to appear in that bright picture. Out of nowhere, Katelyn started receiving strange messages. They came through Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook, each from accounts that seemed to multiply like weeds. Whoever was behind them never showed a face yet. The tone, the rhythm of the words felt too familiar to dismiss. It was the same voice dressed in countless disguises. And the more messages arrived, the more they began to suffocate her peace. Then came the night that shattered her sense of safety. On Facebook, a video appeared. The shaky footage made her blood run cold. It had been filmed just outside her home. Days later, another clip surfaced, this time a shadowy figure, sitting calmly at her kitchen table. It was no longer just messages. Someone had stepped inside her sanctuary, erasing the final boundary between safety and terror. Her best friend, Hannah, later described it as a twisted game of cat and mouse. For Katelyn, it was unbearable. Both furious and helpless, she finally went to the police. She handed them usernames, phone numbers, even one marked Mickey or Ma. When asked, Katelyn admitted Michael had once been the name of an ex-boyfriend, but she wasn't sure. The officers filed a report, advised her to take a self-defense class, and suggested she stay indoors after dark. Yet the truth was painful. Her case notes were thin, her evidence barely examined. Police did drive through the neighborhood, but their records later revealed the patrols lasted less than 5 minutes each time. To Katelyn, it felt like a hollow gesture, a reminder that she might be fighting this battle alone. The harassment only escalated. New numbers, new accounts, new waves of messages. Friends began rotating nights at her apartment, so she wouldn't be alone. The sense of dread grew. The stalker was not only persistent, but fearless, creeping closer each day. Katelyn confided her despair to those she trusted. "I don't know what to do anymore. I feel so anxious. I feel like I'm being left to fend for myself." Here was a young woman who once danced freely in color, now reduced to sitting in a dimly lit room, curtains taped shut, trembling under the weight of her fear. The predator had not revealed himself, but his presence was everywhere, in her phone, at her window, in her very thoughts. It was no longer simply harassment. It was psychological warfare. And for Katelyn, every passing day brought her one step deeper into the shadows. One humid afternoon, while Katelyn was talking with friends about the endless stream of strange messages, a new account appeared on Snapchat. At first, it seemed no different from the dozens of fake profiles she had already endured. But this one carried a name that froze her blood: Mikey. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. Mikey, that had once been the nickname of her ex-boyfriend, Michael Strauss. A memory she had buried, now resurrected in the most terrifying way. In that instant, the puzzle pieces locked together. Katelyn texted her friend in panic. "Damn it, I know who it is." Michael wasn't a stranger. Years earlier, when Katelyn was just 17, their relationship had begun, innocently sparked by shared passions for music and art. But what started sweet quickly turned bitter, warped by control and jealousy. Katelyn cut ties long ago. Yet behind the mask of anonymity, Michael had never let go. What emerged was a chilling portrait of obsession. He had spent months, perhaps years, weaving false identities, buying disposable phone numbers, fabricating digital personas, just to slip into her life again. This was no accident. It was calculated, a ritual of surveillance and control. Then came the twist that sealed Katelyn's fate. On July 28, 2018, she received messages from someone she believed was her online friend, Nate. They had spoken before about meeting in person. That night, Nate asked if he could come by. Katelyn hesitated, then replied that she was staying home alone. What she didn't realize was that Nate wasn't Nate at all. It was Michael, wearing yet another mask. With one careless message, Katelyn had unknowingly told her stalker exactly where she was, and that no one else was with her. Inside her apartment, Katelyn tried to reclaim a sense of safety. She taped her curtains shut, turned her home into a fortress against prying eyes. Yet even in that effort, there was a haunting irony. She was barricading herself from the very man who already knew every detail of her world. From a psychological perspective, this was the climax of the stalker's power. Michael had maneuvered Katelyn into a state of helplessness, a paralysis born from constant fear. Every false message, every fabricated identity deepened his control. He didn't just want Katelyn afraid, he wanted her to doubt her reality, to lose trust in her friends, in her instincts, even in herself. And for Katelyn, exhaustion was setting in. The once free spirit, vibrant with colors and laughter, was now drained, cornered by the shadows of her past. In her final days of freedom, she lived not in joy, but in constant vigilance, trapped in a game she never agreed to play. The mask had fallen. The faceless predator was no longer an unknown entity. It was Michael Strauss, the man she once loved, now revealed as the monster she feared. On August 1st, 2018, Katelyn's phone went silent. Friends couldn't reach her. Her car remained parked outside her small apartment in Westchester. Her bank cards showed no activity. For a young woman who was always chatting, always connected, the silence was deafening. Her mother, Tam, called the police in panic. "My daughter is missing." But instead of filing the case as an urgent disappearance, officers categorized it under telecommunications harassment. Not stalking, not danger. Just a minor offense, as if Katelyn's pleas had never carried weight. That decision, a line of ink on a report, would prove devastating. As investigators began tracing the trail, the evidence pointed in one direction. One of the suspicious numbers Katelyn had received had a 213 area code. It had been purchased online, with no prior history, no attachment to a real identity. Yet the digital fingerprints all circled back to one name, Michael Strauss. His IP, addresses, his fake accounts, his emails. They formed a dark web, binding him to the case. On his computer search, histories told a story far darker than any fiction. How long does a dead body smell? Missing girl in Hamilton. Missing girl in Westchester, Ohio. Weeks earlier, he had searched for how to survive prison and a survivor's guide to prison. It was as if he had already envisioned not only the crime, but also the punishment. For 3 weeks, Katelyn's loved ones lived in torment. And then on August 24th, hope shattered. Just across a field from Michael's home, searchers found Katelyn's body. She was bound with tie tape, wrapped in a blanket, a plastic bag cinched over her head. The official cause, suffocation. The vibrant girl who once dressed in bright colors, who planted flowers and played music, now lay in silence, her final moments stolen by terror. The crime scene spoke a language of cruelty. To bind, to wrap, to suffocate, each act was a grotesque declaration of ownership. Michael hadn't simply killed Katelyn. He had staged her death as a ritual of dominance, a perverse echo of the control he craved throughout their relationship. At 4 o'clock in the morning the next day, police stormed Michael's home. He was arrested, held on a bond of $4 million. Inside, investigators found the objects that turned suspicion into certainty. Katelyn's driver's license, a lock of her hair, her pink necklace, hidden inside his art portfolio. In the basement, a bed set chained with handcuffs still attached. On his phone, Google Maps revealed an image of the very field where Katelyn's body had been discovered. The circle was complete. From the moment Katelyn received her first anonymous message, Michael had been lurking. He haunted her through screens, then crossed into her home, until finally his darkness consumed her entirely. For Katelyn, the world of light and color had ended in a lonely field under the shadow of a man she once thought she knew. When police raided Michael Strauss's home, the facade of a denial crumbled. Everything Katelyn had feared, everything she had reported, was confirmed in chilling detail. Hidden inside his art portfolio, the very place he once stored sketches, were Katelyn's driver's license, a lock of her hair, and her pink necklace. In the basement, investigators found a bed with handcuffs bolted to its frame. The stench of control lingered in every corner of that house. Confronted with this evidence, Michael spun a grotesque excuse. He claimed Katelyn's death was an accident, the result of what he described as an art project, a torture-themed film. According to him, Katelyn had volunteered. He insisted she suffocated by chance, while a plastic bag was placed over her head, and that he panicked, deleted the footage, and discarded the memory card. A story as hollow as it was cruel. Because on his computer, the searches spoke otherwise. How to delete photos from iCloud. How long does a dead body smell? Teen-forced porn. His excuses collapsed under the weight of his own depravity. Prosecutors cut through his lies with surgical precision. There is no universe in which Katelyn consented to this. This was abduction, torture, and murder. Michael's so-called defense was nothing more than a mask, another attempt to reframe his sadism as something less monstrous. The grand jury returned 9 charges: aggravated murder, 3 counts of tampering with evidence, menacing by stalking, petty theft, abuse of a corpse, and gross abuse of a body. The case files filled more than 800 pages, documenting his every move. Faced with overwhelming proof, Michael chose to plead guilty. In exchange, 6 charges were dismissed, sparing him a public trial, but also sparing him the possibility of a harsher sentence. At sentencing, Michael delivered words meant to sound remorseful. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. If there were any way to bring Katelyn back, I would take her place in an instant." But to Katelyn's family, those words rang hollow. Her father David stood and replied with quiet devastation, "My faith tells me I must forgive, but it does not say when, and I don't know if I ever will." Even Michael's mother addressed Katelyn's family, saying she felt sick over what her son had done, apologizing for the horror her family had endured. It was a reminder that crimes like these fracture not just one family, but two. The judge imposed the maximum allowed sentence at 17.5 years in prison, 15 years to life for murder, 18 months for stalking, 1 year for abuse of a corpse, all to be served consecutively. Michael will have only 2 chances at release, first in the year 2036, and again in 2041. Still, outrage spread. A vibrant young woman's life ended in terror, and yet her killer may walk free through in less than 2 decades. It left an open wound. Had justice truly been served, or had the law merely offered a pale shadow of it? On September 1st, 2018, Katelyn's funeral was held. But it was not cloaked in black. Her family and friends chose to honor her in the way she had lived in color. They wore tie-dye shirts, brought drums, and filled the air with music. Instead of silence, there was rhythm. Instead of darkness, there was light. It was their way of giving back the colors Katelyn had once spread so freely. A tree was planted in her memory, a living tribute to the girl who had loved nature and spent her childhood planting flowers in the soil. And on the very day her body was discovered, a rainbow stretched across the sky, sunlight breaking through the clouds directly over the field where she had been found. To her family, it was a sign, Katelyn reaching out saying thank you, letting them know she was finally at peace. Yet peace was hard to grasp. Katelyn's mother confessed to, "Whenever my mind isn't occupied, I see my daughter. I still feel the moment she looked through that plastic with tape binding her arms, staring at the man who killed her. That image will haunt her forever." Michael Strauss now sits behind bars, sentenced to 17.5 years. But no sentence can heal the hole left in Katelyn's family. No number of years can replace the laughter, the art, the music she should still be creating. Justice was served, but it feels incomplete, a patch on a wound that will never close. Katelyn's death is more than a tragedy. It is a warning. Stalking is not harmless. It escalates. It kills. And when cries for help are ignored, the silence can be fatal. If this story touched you, share it. Speak up when you see the signs. Because silence is not just complicity. Silence can cost a life.